So today we're going to be covering a little bit more of No Country for Old Men, at least a couple chapters, hopefully more than that. Last time where we left off, we were looking at chapter 2, and I read a little bit of the of Belle's monologue. Um, and chapter 3, Belle kind of gets into the changing technology, the shifting sands of technology changes. Um, and I'll read a little bit of his monologue here. I don't know that law enforcement benefits all that much from new technology. Tools that comes into our hands comes into theirs too, right? So the idea is, I'm not confident that we really do much better, that we have these weapons that are more effective, or these cars that are maybe faster because the enemy can do this. Bell mentions that he still likes the old Colts, the 4440s, the older guns, the revolvers and whatnot, right? He's a classic guy. He's classic. And then he mentions some things get worse with time, right? Some things get better, some things get worse. He says, I still have an old car with the 454 in it. You can't get that anymore. I tried one of these new cars, can't outrun a fat man. So I kept my old car, right? I wish I could keep my old gun. This is when he mentions that, that scenario that he started with. The boy at the gas chamber, the execution. Talked about the different kinds of people who are on death row. Some of them don't really understand what's going on, right? And he talks about some of the old-time sheriffs that never wore a gun, right? So again, this is kind of where we start to flesh out this character as an Andy Griffith type sheriff. And Andy Griffith was the right sheriff for Mayberry. And the story, and if you've ever watched the Andy Griffith show, you may recognize the thought that Andy Griffith was an old town or small town sheriff in a small town. He was the right character for the right scenario, but the town is being passed by the rest of the world around it. And that is a lot of the problem that they deal with, is the world around them is developing and growing in, new technologies, while this town they live in, the city they live in, Mayberry, stays in the past a little bit. And they like staying in the past, and they're even kind of trying to stay in the past. But, the future's catching up with them, if that makes sense. And so what we have next is we've got Moss getting out, going into his house, talking to his wife. She says, don't hurt nobody. And he says, I'm not going to promise that's how people get hurt, right? And Belle's about to eat when he gets a phone call. And then he heads on down, goes into Lozier Canyon. And what does he see down there, right? Takes a look around, and I believe this is when he finally... Yep, there's a car fire. And they're looking at the car fire, trying to figure out what's causing it. And it's just, oh, hell's bells. It's all hell in a handbasket, right? Good Lord, what is going on here? Then he goes to the office, and there's another phone call. Sanderson Canyon. Bunch dead. So they go take a look, and what do they find? They find maybe 20 men. And Wendell, as well as Ed Tom Bell, deduce that there's got to be money and there's got to be dope. And the money and the dope are missing. So this can't be all the people involved, right? And remember, Anton Chigurh killed 2 men last night, right? He smoked 2 guys at Llewellyn's car. And they see Llewellyn's car, and they both recognize it. And they both know Llewellyn, because again, Sheriff Ed Tom Bell is a sheriff of a small county, right? Terrell County. He lives in Sanderson, which is the seat of Terrell County, and which just means is where like the capital of the county is. And he knows, not very well, but he knows Llewellyn Moss. And so they both know his truck. And they're like, I don't know that this boy would be involved in dope, right? This is quite literally the top of the iceberg. And so they figure, all right, we got to go look into it. So they're still looking around the wreckage. And while they're looking around the wreckage, Llewellyn, right? He's already gotten his wife and they've skipped town. He said, we got to go. There's money in this bag. We're on the run now because we're being hunted. Ed Tom Bell takes a look around this wreckage, and while they're looking at the wreckage, where is Anton Chigurh? You better believe he's at Llewellyn's house, looking around. I'm looking for Llewellyn Moss. And he goes and he speaks to the woman who's in charge of the trailer park, and he says, I'm looking for Llewellyn Moss. And she says, did you check his trailer? He's not in his trailer. Where does he work? I can't give out that information. Yes, you can. I can't give out that information. There's a toilet flush. There's a sound in the background. Boom. I guess she won't be giving out that information. It would seem that Anton did not kill her, except in the next scene. He's at Llewellyn's work. All the guys just say that he up and left. Nobody knows where he went. And then Moss says, we go back to Moss. He's in a cab. I need a hotel somewhere cheap. Don't really care, right? Guy gets him someplace cheap. Llewellyn buys a room for the night, and he goes to sleep, right? Wakes up in the middle of the night. I can't sleep. So, hails another cab, heads into town, and he goes and he gets some supplies, right? And he takes the case, he puts it as far as he can into the gosh dang vent with a one of those hanger racks where you put your hangers, like the pole in your closet, basically. And then he goes into town, gets a steak, has a nice time, and then he's headed back, and the window is open. Not the way he left it. Keep driving, he tells the driver. And he goes to Walmart and a hardware store, and he buys some supplies, and he comes on back. And he tells the woman he wants another room, and he needs a map. He looks at the map. He gets the room that is adjacent, or behind his, so that the air ducts will be connected, and he'll be able to get the thing. Fashions a coat hanger into a hook. He tapes it all up. And if you've seen the movie, you might recall this part. And he drags the case out. And then he gets the heck out of there. While he's on his way out, Chigurh is showing up. So Chigurh is just kind of one step behind Moss so far. Chigurh shows up at this hotel. And he goes into the room where Moss was. And he blasts the Mexicans that are there looking for the case. And then he looks for the case for a good long while. And then he opens the vent. And he looks in the vent and he sees the drag marks where the case just was. Llewellyn's gone. Anton's on his trail. If I'm not mistaken, that is the end of chapter 3, right? And there's a little bit of a funny exchange if you've seen the movie or read the book, right? Llewellyn's talking to this guy at like hardware store, like sporting goods store, and he says, I need tent poles. And they're like, well, what's the serial number? I just need tent poles. Well, I can't get you tent poles unless I know what tent it's for. And he's like, okay, never mind. Get me a tent. What tent would you like? The one that has the most poles, because he just needs tent poles. But anyway, chapter 4 starts off, as always, with an Ed Tom Bell monologue. This is when he says, I was sheriff of this county at 25. Hard to believe. My father wasn't a lawman. My grandfather was. We were sheriffs at the same time. Him up in Plano, me down here. I think he was mighty proud of that. I know I was. Right. Then he talks about his wife. How lovely she is and how lucky he is to have her. Now, Bell heads on into a cafe, right? And then he's talking to, I believe it is Wendell. And he talks about some of the things he's heard of, serial killers from Florida and California met in the middle of the country and just went on a spree. Bad things that happen, right? And they head over to Moss's trailer. And nobody's there. But remember, Chigurh went into Moss's trailer, if you recall, and I didn't mention this, but now I will. Went into the trailer, looked around, drank some milk. Straight out the freaking carton, by the way. Not very respectful. But, Ed Tom Bell is there, and they're like, oh, man, I'm thinking we just missed him. They get a DEA agent that wants to take them over to the crime scene where all the dead bodies are in the canyon. They go down, they look around, they have a chat about it, the whole 9 yards, right? Vehicles are all shot up except for one. Of course, it's Moss's vehicle. And then there's actually the other 2 men that were killed, but that car is missing, right? Now, Moss goes, and this is when Moss gets his gosh dang stick, and he grabs the case and beats a hasty escape. This all happens in chapter 4, of course. Now, Chigurh utilized the transponder, and Moss doesn't yet know about the transponder, right? And Chigurh is a very good, right? I just need the one that has the most tent poles. Oh, well, all right. Yeah. Sheriff, we just missed him, right? And it's just such a good, again, when you remember that scene, you can kind of put the Andy Griffith, Barney Fife dichotomy back together because that's who Wendell is. He's a very Barney Fife, speaks without thinking, and just going off half-cocked, Meanwhile, Chigurh is this one-man wrecking crew, kills without remorse, and follows the breadcrumbs. He's very talented at what he's doing, right? And he has a reason for every single thing he does. There is nothing he does that doesn't have a reason. Now, he's using this transponder that Moss doesn't know about yet, but Moss is going to figure it out, right? And meantime, Ed Tom Bell has received an autopsy of the man they found in the trunk at the beginning of the story. And they say it was a .45 caliber bullet wound with no bullet. Bell thinks about it for a while, and he realizes this man's using a cattle gun on these people. And he even tells Torbert, who's like a secretary or something, I'm not entirely sure. But again, a dim-witted assistant. He tells Torbert, you ever been to a slaughterhouse? Oh, I think I went to one when I was a kid. Oh, you'd remember, my man. Oh, yeah, I think I went. They don't take kids to slaughterhouses. I snuck in, right? And he goes, you know how they killed the cattle? He says, well, there was a guy who would knock them. He's a knocker. And he'd sit there and they just send the cattle in and he'd knock them good. He's like, yeah, that's how they used to do it. But nowadays they use a bolt gun, captive bolt, shoots a bolt about 3 inches. And that's how they do it. And Torbert goes, I wish you hadn't told me. And Ed Tom says, I knew that would be your reaction before I even said it. Right? So they're dealing with an absolute monster. Right? Now, let me just flip through a couple more pages. Okay, yeah. So then Moss heads over to Eagle Pass, which is a little closer to the Mexico border. The upside of being calm and collected is your thoughts and actions can be with meaning and effective. Howard, even if evil, I guess it gives Anton an incredible edge that he is calm and thoughtful. And that's a part of this, right? Is Ed Tom is doing a lot of thinking. Llewellyn Moss is doing a lot of thinking. Anton Chigurh is doing a lot of thinking. They're all thinking quite a lot about what they do, except Ed Tom is thinking about morality. Anton and Llewellyn are thinking about results. But Llewellyn is already behind the 8 ball.